Every week, Question Time travels to a different part of the United Kingdom. Tonight, we've come to Dorking in Surrey, an historic market town surrounded by some of the most beautiful countryside in southern England. It lies at the foot of the North Downs, close to Box Hill, a destination for cyclists, walkers and photographers. Dorking also boasts England's largest vineyard. Our audience members arriving here this evening, as every week, reflect the general political picture across the nation. And they have plenty of questions about the Peter Mandelson scandal, and we'll hear their views about whether it should cost the PM his job. And student loans, are they just an unfair tax on graduates? Welcome to Question Time from Dorking. From the government, Emma Reynolds, Environment Secretary. She worked as a special advisor during the Blair years and became an MP in 2010. Julia Lopez is the Conservatives' Shadow Science Secretary. She entered Parliament in 2017 alongside Kemi Badenoch and is considered one of her closest allies. Munira Wilson is the Liberal Democrats' education spokesperson. Before politics, she worked as a lobbyist for organisations including Save the Children. Zia Yusuf is Reform UK's head of policy. He clashed with high-profile Tories who've since defected to Reform, including Robert Jenrick, but now believes they'll play a big role in preparing the party for government. And Oli Dugmore is a broadcaster and journalist from The New Statesman. He's called student loans a national scandal and wants Rachel Reeves to change the system. Good evening. Welcome to our panellists. Welcome to our audience here in Dorking. Very nice to see you, and welcome to you at home as well. Joining the conversation on social media, just sit back and watch the proceedings, whichever you prefer. Won't surprise you, there's one quite big topic tonight, and we're going to kick off with it with a question from Sonak Patel.
Should Keir Starmer resign over the Peter Mandelson scandal?
So, Emma, you must have been thinking, how have I drawn the short straw to come on Question Time tonight? But here you are, and that question is for you. Should Keir Starmer resign?
No, I don't think he should resign, because I think Keir Starmer is somebody who is motivated by public service, wants to do right by the public, is absolutely committed to tackling the cost of living and delivering the change that we promised 18 months ago. We were always clear that there would be no overnight fixes. We had a tough inheritance, but we are starting to turn the corner. Obviously, it's been a tough couple of days. I'm not going to deny that.
I mean, that has to be an understatement, surely. You've got Harriet Harman tonight saying, this is Harriet Harman, saying Keir Starmer is weak, naive and gullible for his explanation of why he appointed Peter Mandelson and why he believed him.
Well, with respect to Harriet, I don't agree with that. And I think what we've seen is Peter Mandelson betraying this government, betraying the previous Labour government. As you said, I was an advisor in that government, betraying the British people at a time during the global financial crash when the government, when the Prime Minister at the time, Gordon Brown, was trying to protect people from the impact of the global financial crash. Peter Mandelson was forwarding emails with market-sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein. That we discovered this week, but obviously we had the discovery also in September of the depth of the relationship that he had with a convicted paedophile.
Yes, but none of that's in question, Emma. No. What's in question is whether Keir Starmer has, well, in the words of Harriet Harman, is a weak, naive and gullible. I mean, Keir Starmer was talking about it today, and he said, look, Peter Mandelson lied to me and to other MPs and said he had a passing knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein, hardly knew him. Listen, I don't know about you, but how many people that you hardly know do you then go and stay at the houses of?
Well, Peter Mandelson was asked about this in the vetting process that was carried out, and we will be publishing the documents, working alongside the police, but also the relevant parliamentary committee on this. But Peter Mandelson lied repeatedly to the Prime Minister and his team, and the Prime Minister today has said that he is sorry for having appointed him, that obviously had he known then what we all know now, there's no way he would have appointed him to be our ambassador in Washington. So, you know, I think that I would rather be sitting here, obviously, talking about the big issues of the day that the government is trying to grapple with, whether it's in my own area of trying to ensure that we reform the water system so we don't have pollution in our rivers. Obviously, people have got questions that the government needs to answer
there are hands up already, which
yes,
we'll be coming to in a minute.
It's a real shame that this man, Peter Mandelson, has betrayed the British people, he's betrayed our government, he's lied repeatedly to the Prime Minister, and we will be publishing those documents around the vetting process.
Should Keir Starmer resign, Julia?
Well, look, I was in the chamber during Prime Minister's questions this week, and on the third question, when it was clear that he was aware of the ongoing relationship between Epstein and Mandelson at the time that he was appointed, you could feel the air leave the room. And at that point, I thought it's over. This man has lost all authority to govern. So whether or not you buy into what he's saying, I don't think that his MPs are going to listen to him anymore. We've spent the entire week talking about the Mandelson scandal, and now we've got a process in train that's going to take this government's energy for the coming weeks and months ahead. And while that's underway, every single Labour minister and cabinet minister is going to be thinking about what's coming next and how they should position themselves. They're not going to be governing, and that is the fundamental problem that Keir Starmer has now. And I have to say, I simply do not buy this betrayal narrative, the idea that they were lied to, because ask yourselves, you know, when you hear the words Peter Mandelson, before any of this happened, what did you think? You think the guy's slippery. You know, everybody thinks the guy's slippery. The guy resigned or was sacked twice. You think Oleg Deripaska, you think Jeffrey Robinson. And the idea that Keir Starmer was not aware that this is a character that comes with political risk. Ministers have actually admitted they accepted there was political risk, but they believed that Mandelson had particular special skills that overrode that risk. And I'm afraid that means that he's injected Mandelson's poison right into the heart of this government. Now, he could have been a historical figure which causes mild embarrassment to the Labour Party, but is a man of the past. Keir Starmer placed this man directly at the heart of his government into a highly important relationship about security and trade, and now it's blown up in his face. And I'm afraid the idea that it's all, I've been lied to, it's a betrayal of trust, I'm afraid nobody buys it, and none of his MPs bought it by the end of Wednesday.
So why didn't the Conservatives object to Peter Mandelson's appointment at the time?
I find there's an extraordinary new line that's coming out today that's almost the Conservatives'
Well, I'm just saying,
that,
if the Conservative line is that this was in the public domain, it was information that was brought into the public domain initially by the Financial Times, and Kemi Bade not made much of that yesterday. So it was known at Westminster. So
well, at the time,
I'm just asking, why didn't you object at the time?
There were many figures in Parliament who were asking for a proper procedure, particularly the Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
Did the Conservatives object to Mandelson being appointed because of his links with Epstein?
Kemi was the person in September that was asking Keir Starmer whether he should have
I'm asking at the time when Mandelson was appointed.
Well, I think it happened
did the Conservatives
shortly
object to him
after
being appointed because of his connections to Epstein?
Well, I think we had concerns about Mandelson being in that relationship, particularly as there was a good ambassador there at the time, Karen Pierce, whom Trump actually had a very good relationship with. I think Trump himself called Peter Mandelson Slippery Pete. And you know, I think Kemi had just been elected into the role, and the idea that it was for us to be, you know, making the judgment on Mandelson.
I'm not saying it was for you. I'm not saying it one way or the other. It's just the Conservatives are saying it was so obvious he should never have been appointed. So I was just wondering why.
Well, I think there was a lot of discussion at the time,
okay.
Fiona. I think there was.
All right. Woman there in the black sweater.
I think Keir Starmer should resign because I think he's just shown appalling judgment, or he has made a deliberate decision, a cynical appointment of Peter Mandelson because of his shared acquaintance with Trump, with, in other words, Jeffrey Epstein.
Man in the blue sweater there.
Yeah, it's only today it's Keir Starmer saying that he asked him direct questions about his relationship and whether he'd received any inducements or anything of the like. And it was in the public domain for this story from the Financial Times a couple of years ago that he was staying in his apartment whilst he was still in prison. Is that the depth of the vetting process?
And man there in the black top.
I was a junior lawyer when Keir Starmer was DPP, and he was an inspiring figure at that point in time. He's obviously progressed onto the position that he is in now, but the issues about him appointing Mandelson to his role it will be subject to scrutiny about the process upon which that took place. But isn't the question, or isn't the issue really about how people like Mandelson have got through that system with someone like Keir Starmer, who is a man of integrity, I believe, and he has been subject to this, these policies and processes that have allowed someone like Mandelson to get to where he is? And doesn't that make the case for having people in the Houses of Parliament who are ordinary people, people like this Green candidate who is standing in Denton and Gorton, who is a normal person, who is going to, in my view, be someone of integrity, someone who is going to be more reflective of the people, as opposed to just promoting political elites just to get into positions of power?
Zia.
Well, let's be clear about Keir Starmer. The only reason he is the Prime Minister, the reason he won the general election, is because the Tory vote collapsed, because the British public had finally had enough of their betrayal and their corruption. Keir Starmer's entire offering to the British electorate was simply that he would not be corrupt and sleazy like the Tories. And what have we seen since then? An unholy fire hose of corruption and sleaze. One scandal after another. It started with Lord Ali. Do you remember him? One of Labour's biggest donors, who got it past, no less, to number 10 Downing Street. Then it turned out Keir Starmer had somehow forgotten to declare that he and his wife had received thousands of pounds of donations in the form of designer clothes and even designer spectacles and hospitality from Lord Ali. Then he put one of his donors in a cushy job in the Treasury without telling anyone that he was a donor. He's managed to find time to cancel elections for millions of people, drive farmers to suicide, and withdraw the right to jury trial from British people. And now we find out, by the way, I think the questions so far have been incisive, but I don't think quite do justice to what Keir Starmer's admitted that he knew. Keir Starmer in Parliament admitted that he knew that Peter Mandelson continued his disgusting friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, even after Epstein had become a convicted paedophile. Now we know that Mandelson received tens of thousands of dollars at least from Jeffrey Epstein, probably more, but that's what we all know already. And what do we also know? He leaked information about the €500 billion bailout and Gordon Brown's resignation before the public knew anything about it. And get this too, because I don't know how much time people watching this programme have spent looking at the appalling things on the Justice Department's website. But on the day that Jeffrey Epstein was released from prison for having been in jail for paedophilia, he received an email from Peter Mandelson saying, and I quote, "Liberation Day." Keir Starmer chose to ignore the advice of security services and make this man Britain's ambassador to the United States. Yes, for sure, Peter Mandelson almost certainly deserves to be in jail, but the buck stops with the executive. Keir Starmer is a disgrace to his office and should resign.
So Peter Mandelson obviously is not here to answer into any of this. I have to say that the BBC understands that Peter Mandelson's position is that he has not acted in any way criminally and that he was not motivated by financial gain. That is his response. Zia, what do you make of the fact that Nigel Farage said of Mandelson when he was appointed, he's a very clever man, he'll be respected because he has a big brain, and that he'd be willing to help Mandelson negotiate with the Trump administration?
Well, the thing Nigel also said at the time, a multitude of times, that given Nigel's close relationship with the President of the United States, he offered himself to be
sure, but we're talking about Mandelson tonight here,
and given that,
sure, but that's not the point. The point is that it was. Hang on, Zia.
Which Starmer then declined.
The point is that what was known about Mandelson in terms of the fact that he had stayed at the house of a convicted paedophile while he was in prison. That was in the public domain. Nonetheless, Nigel Farage seemed to think his appointment wasn't too bad.
Yeah, look, I understand that line of questioning, and I think it's a reasonable one. But I would say this. If you're the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, you have at your disposal the entire apparatus of state of this country, including our security services.
But the key fact about Epstein was known.
I say the buck stops
publicly
with
known.
The executive. Nigel Farage is not the Prime Minister. Nigel Farage is not the person who appointed Peter Mandelson to be this country's ambassador to the United States of America, in defiance of advice, by the way, from security services, as has been widely reported. So I'm afraid we've got to go back to the original question, which is, should Keir Starmer resign? If you have at your disposal the entire security services and you choose to ignore them and put your buddy and somebody who has frankly been, almost the embodiment of sleaze in this country. His nickname was literally the Prince of Darkness. That was literally his nickname. Anyone in this audience who would have hired people or done an interview, if you found out a candidate was widely reputed to be known as the Prince of Darkness, you'd probably ask a few more questions. So I'm afraid trying to divert responsibility away from the Prime Minister of this country, who is the executive and who appointed him, I think is misguided.
Sure. I'm not trying to say that anyone else is responsible. I'm simply pointing out what was said about his appointment at the time. Man here in the front in the dark blue sweater.
I wonder if there's any skeletons in the Reform Party candidates.
Well, there have been a few here. I don't know if you want to quickly respond to that.
I think I might respectfully ask for you to be a bit more precise in your question.
Well, we have heard of various things going on in the past, haven't we? It's not like you're squeaky clean, so...
Well, I mean, I don't know. The former leader of Reform UK in Wales is in prison, it's 10.5 years, I think, for accepting bribes from a former pro-Russian Ukrainian politician. I mean, we're asking about Mandelson, but since you mentioned that, do you want to respond to that, Zia?
Yeah, I mean, but that is correct. Nathan Gill is someone I've never met, I've never spoken to. Predates my time. He was a part of Reform, and most people in this country didn't know who Reform was. Look, I don't want to minimise it in the sense he's clearly a traitor to this country. He's a bad apple. He deserves to be in jail. He deserves the sentence that he got, and Reform expelled him, even back in those early days, the moment that they knew about that. That isn't what's happening here. He certainly was not made the ambassador to the United States of America, and he was not vetted. He was not vetted by our security services. So, listen, you know, every political party, once it gets to a certain scale, is going to have some bad apples. Again, I'm not minimising it. Again, I want to repeat, he was a traitor. He deserves to be in jail. But we should not try to this whataboutery, given that this country right now is in a serious state of crisis. I actually agree with the point that right now Keir Starmer is in exactly the position a multitude of Tory Prime Ministers were, which is spending all of his cognitive capacity and his time fighting for his own survival. All of his cabinet ministers are plotting against him. And the real losers, by the way, are the British people who have not had a competent, loyal government in decades.
Let me bring in the rest of the panel here. Ollie.
Look,
Should Keir Starmer go? That's basically it.
Yeah, that's the question. Look, I'm generally a pretty forgiving person, and I think our politics is poorer for its lack of empathy. I think most people should not be defined by the worst thing that they've ever done in their lives, and most people deserve a second chance. I do, however, have some moral boundaries, and one of them is that I think it is wrong to have sex with children, and I wouldn't want to be friends with anyone that did that, and I certainly wouldn't want to work with them. If I did, I think you'd all be asking me questions, and they'd be valid ones. That is apparently now a fringe position for some people at the top of the Labour Party, which is an extraordinary thing to be able to say. I don't know about you, I don't know any paedophiles, I don't know anyone that's run a global sex trafficking ring. These are extraordinary things that we're talking about here. And not only that, and I should be clear, there's some brilliant journalism that my colleagues at the New Statesman have done over the last couple of days. Our political editor, Alva Ray, has reported that not only did the people at the top of the Labour Party know about this, and that's because this information was available on Google. They don't need the security services to tell them it.
When you say this, because there's a whole slew of information coming out, but I think you're referring specifically to the fact that there were photographs of Mandelson's with Epstein, and the fact that he stayed in his house
whilst he was in prison. Whilst he was in prison. And they didn't think that that was disqualifying. They thought, actually, this is our guy. This is our guy that we're going to elevate to the most prestigious diplomatic posting that we have. We're going to make him our man in Washington. And not only that, we're going to bring him back to London every so often to advise us on cabinet reshuffles. And actually, when we're choosing our candidates for the 2024 general election, we're going to let him input on that too, because we think he's a great judge of character. Come on. I just add, Keir Starmer promised a few things when he was trying to become Prime Minister. You may remember the Labour Party manifesto. It had one word on the front. It just said change. He made a really big deal about standards in public life. Really big deal of it. And fair play, right, after the sort of moral atrocities of austerity, the COVID contracts, the way that the Tories ran the country, you can understand why he did that. If you're going to stand on the steps of Downing Street and promise that to the British people and then do this, what does that say about you? What does that say about you?
Let me bring Munira in, because she hasn't yet spoken. Munira.
So I think Keir Starmer has clearly shown an absolutely catastrophic error of judgment in appointing Mandelson, knowing what he did, knowing what was in the public domain about Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. And as my party leader, Ed Davey, posed the question at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday, when Starmer made that appointment, was he thinking about the victims of Epstein? Or was he, as that lady quite correctly said in the audience, thinking about who's the sort of character who can cozy up to a character like Trump? And I suspect it was trying to work out how he was going to continue to cozy up to Trump that led him to appoint Mandelson. But where we are now, I mean, it's an absolute shambles. And frankly, after the soap opera the British people had to suffer under the last Tory government, where we had a succession of prime ministers, a succession of different ministers in different departments, and all sorts of moral and political failings, I think the British public deserved and expected better. And as Oli said, they voted for change in 2024. And they want this government focusing on the cost of living crisis, on NHS waiting lists, on fixing social care, on cleaning up our rivers and seas, and this is a huge distraction. So I say to Labour MPs, and I say to Starmer, put up or shut up, and put yourself to a vote of confidence in Labour MPs so that they can decide whether they want to keep you or not, because we need you, the government, to focus on the priorities of the British public and fix all of the broken services in this country which the Tories left behind, fix our economy, get it growing again so that we can be prosperous again and a successful nation.
I'll come back to you.
Fiona, I just want to add, and on the point to Zia about skeletons in Reform's closet, I'd like to ask him to maybe just urgently explain whether there was any connection or contact between his party treasurer, Nick Candy, and Epstein, which has been suggested in some of the documents that have come out from Epstein.
Do you want to do that? Yeah, sure. So I know Nick Candy well. He's a property developer. He sells high-value properties. And that's what he was doing. And there's no evidence from any of the emails that have come out who's doing anything other than trying to sell some properties. But Nick Candy was not and never has been, and probably, as much as I love Nick, is not ever going to be the Prime Minister of this country, nor Britain's ambassador to the United Kingdom. I genuinely find it fascinating that a multitude of panellists now have tried to bring one of the biggest crises, objectively, this country has faced in years, back to reform in any which way possible, through any tangent possible. So I'm afraid British people see through all of
In fairness, one of the challenges came from the audience, but a woman there in the glasses.
I think that since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, he upset the pensioners by saying about the winter fuel allowance. Then he upset the farmers. And then there was the Angela Rayner scandal. And then Ali. I think, how can people trust this Prime Minister when he appointed Mandelson and he knew that he had the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and also he's done so many U-turns on different policies. I mean, he's betrayed the British people, especially on disappointment with Mandelson. So how can we trust him, and how can we keep him as Prime Minister? Because I don't think he's done a good job so far. Okay. And how can he carry on being the Prime Minister?
Okay. Woman at the back with the bearing.
I think that Keir Starmer is incompetent, and the Mandelson scandal is only further proof of that. But I think really the issue is that he's been incompetent the whole way through because he hasn't stood on any of what he said he was going to do. He doesn't care about working people or minorities or Palestinians. He doesn't care. This is just further proof, and I think it says a lot about just the fickleness of the voter base, that politicians can say, vote reform so that we can change this, when really they're just as corrupt, and that really the issue lies in the governance, and that he's just a cowardly figure who doesn't want to He's taking Labour away from really its core values and turning it into something that's further right or to the middle. Yeah.
Okay. Again, the man in the white shirt at the very back.
I think what we've established so far over the last 5 or 6 years, I think especially, is that no party, major party at the very least, is without scandal. And I don't condone any of the scandals at all, but I think that we've seen that the election in July 2024 was probably the most recent time since, October 22, that this country has seen any kind of stability in governance. And I think when you face so many threats on a global stage, whether it be geopolitical tensions, a possible new world order with the United States and Russia, I think, is it really a sensible idea to change the leader at such a pivotal time, And correct me if I'm wrong, I think Emma will probably know more about this than I do, but I also thought as well that if a Labour leader was changed, that required then the general election as per the terms of their rules. So I feel like right now it's better off either keeping the party current or keeping the leader sort of current to avoid further destabilisation of this country.
I don't think it does require. I mean, if you think about Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, they just,
that's
not necessarily particularly smoothly, but it just went from one to the other. Let's take one more point, and then I'm going to come back to you, Emma. Yes, the woman there in the grey sweater. Oh, there's two of you. I'll hear from both of you. Woman in the grey sweater first. Yeah.
Given Keir Starmer's record, I think he should resign, but more worryingly, who would replace him?
Is there anyone you'd want to replace him?
No.
Okay, and you had something to say as well. Yes.
Yeah, I think my kind of point is similar, actually. It's a tough gig, isn't it, at the top? And we keep seeing people fail. So we know that people on the panel are within this environment. So what is the answer for us? How do we get it right? Because we all feel like we want to get it right. People keep failing. You're in the kind of inner circles. You see how it works. So what is the answer? What is the solution for us to move forwards?
And do you think Keir Starmer should remain in post or resign?
I saw the news tonight. He looks like a very broken man. And I do feel for him on that kind of side, but I can't excuse what he did. I really was hopeful that he could be a good leader. I thought he had all the qualities. So if he doesn't, then who does? So how do we move forwards? That's what I feel upset and kind of frustrated about.
I mean, he's had, to say a difficult few days would be, as I said at the beginning of this programme, a massive understatement. Where does it go from here? Because, Labour MPs are contacting the BBC hand over fist about saying he's toast, he's a dead man walking, maybe he might just cling on till the May elections, but then he's definitely out.
Well, I agree.
It can't continue like this, can it?
I agree with the gentleman at the back. I think one of the reasons that the last Conservative government was so unpopular is because they kept chopping and changing their leaders. And I do think we are in a very difficult geopolitical situation. We've got war on our continent. We've got a very tricky set of relationships internationally that I do think that Keir Starmer has dealt with very skillfully in a very, very difficult geopolitical time. So I believe in Keir Starmer. I believe that he has the interests of the public at heart. The security services didn't advise against appointing Mandelson. He went through a security vetting and a due diligence process. We've got to have a look at that process because it clearly didn't throw up the things that we now know. But Munira said she wants the government to tackle the cost of living, reduce NHS waiting times.
She wants a vote of no confidence, that's what she wants.
And the substantial thing she talked about was tackling the cost of living, reducing NHS waiting times and cleaning up our rivers, lakes and seas. And that's exactly what this government is getting on and doing.
It was widely reported, I can just clarify, it was widely reported amongst broadsheet newspapers, reputable media outlets, that security services did have concerns. And if you actually listen to Keir Starmer's testimony
not that he
today,
didn't pass the vetting,
Keir Starmer's, they did have concerns. Keir Starmer's version of what vetting means is simply asking Peter Mandelson, literally asking the candidate what the reality was. Anyone who's ever done any form of vetting, even for a junior job inside a corporation, would know that's not what vetting means. And again, the Prime Minister of this country has the security services at his disposal. That is what makes this such a disgrace.
And if somebody lies to the security services, then they can't get the full picture of what happened.
And let me just bring Julian briefly.
The gentleman up there is absolutely right. This is not the situation we want the country to be in. There are extremely serious things happening out there in the world, but also enormous problems that we've got domestically. And the lady listed all the groups of people that he has angered in the last 18 months. One of them now is Labour MPs, particularly female Labour MPs. One of the things that was very interesting about Wednesday was the way in which Labour MP after Labour MP from the women Labour MPs lined up to talk about their utter horror at what was going on. And the reason why this really matters to the domestic agenda is because there's a whole bunch of things that this guy's got to try and get over the line. So there's a big vote coming up on immigration. There's already a group of Labour MPs lining up to oppose that legislation. We saw that they can't get anything over the line on welfare. There's so many things now that he's simply not going to be able to get through Parliament. And that means, unfortunately, that he's not going to be able to govern. And I say unfortunately because I think so few people have any confidence in any of the other candidates who are on offer.
All right, I'm going to park this subject for now. I know quite a few of you still got your hands up, but there are other questions that you wanted to ask outside the kind of maelstrom of what's been going on. So I'm going to move on to that. Before I do, I just want to tell you where we are next week, which is Bristol. And the week after that, we are in Ringwood, just outside the New Forest, lovely part of the world. So if you live in or near either area, you want to come and be on in the Question Time audience, that's Bristol and then Ringwood, go to the website, follow the instructions there, and hopefully we will see you. OK, Claire Shaw, where are you sitting? Off you go. What's your question?
Will student loans be the next mis-selling scandal?
Right, so there's been a lot about student loans recently. Let me just set the context a little bit. Most of this is focused on Plan 2 student loans. Now, the situation is a bit different in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. But in England, we're talking about roughly 4 million people. And the interest charge on these loans is RPI plus up to 3%. So it can be up to 6.2%. And you have got graduates now who are paying down those loans but still seeing them increase. And the government's introduced the idea of freezing the tax threshold for that. So we had a little look. Oli, we reckon you're closest to the situation. With you've talked about your student loan, so what's the score with you?
Yeah, so I have a Plan 2 student loan. I was one of the cohort of people that were given that gift by the Lib Dems and the Tories.
So this is 2012 to 2023?
Yeah, exactly. That's when I went to uni, 2012. What does that mean in plain terms? It means that for 1 year of my degree, 1 year of study, it cost me the same. Everyone sat here, Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, everything they paid does not cover 1 year of my tuition. Do you think that's fair? First point of call. Right, yeah, that's the first place. What is the sort of most egregious thing on top of that is my 3-year course, £9 grand a year for the tuition. On top of that, I have a maintenance loan. So roughly speaking, I left uni with about 37.5 grand of debt, or I should have done, when we're talking this question about was it missold to me. From the day I started, I was charged interest. RPI plus a certain percent. RPI, by the way, a measure of inflation the government doesn't like to use because they think it overrates inflation. They prefer a different measure, CPI, not when they're taking my money. Since I went to uni in 2012, just bear that figure in mind about my debt, 37.5 grand. Since I went to uni in 2012, the amount of interest, I did the sums before I got here, that I have accrued is £32,000. So was it missold to me when I was told it was going to cost me 9 grand a year? Yeah, I'd say so. On top of that, it's a regressive system. So if you're wealthy enough to pay the fees up front, to pay your 27k, you don't get charged interest. So if you're rich enough, you don't pay the same as me. Is that fair? No, I don't think it is. There are some beneficial parts of the student loan system. So, for example, if you're not a high earner, you don't have to pay. And after a certain period of time, it gets wiped. That's a good thing. Unfortunately, the government has unilaterally changed the terms of the loan. So we were told when we went to university, it would start at a certain threshold and it would increase. It would keep in line with earnings. We're now in a situation where for a little more than the living wage, £500 difference. If you're paid the living wage and you work 40 hours a week for a year, your salary, it's only £500 under the threshold when you start paying it back. So basically, if you have a job, you're going to pay it. It shouldn't be like that. The government changed the terms of the loan that I agreed to. They did it unilaterally. I'd call that loan sharking. What's more, if I wanted to change the terms and I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to stop paying, what do you think would happen?
So what do you think should happen, Oli? This is a cri de coeur from you,
Yeah.
which I knew was
I'll
going to be
keep going,
coming.
Fiona.
Yeah. Well, how else are we going to pay for it?
Well, how did you guys pay for it? The state paid for it, didn't they?
It did.
Good enough for you, good enough for me. So, look, I think education...
But do you think that's a realistic proposition now? Is that what you would suggest
I think a government that was motivated by the politics of the soul rather than the politics of process could get their head around this. Yeah, look, I think education is a public good. I don't think it's a commodity. I think we all benefit from having an educated populace. And I'll be really clear and specific, I don't just mean undergraduate study here. I'm talking about vocational training. Also, there is so much that we could change about our graduate system.
Okay.
Zia,
right.
I'll just add one thing, sorry, Fiona. If we're talking about like doctors, Zia, you've spoken before about the difficulty of UK-trained doctors going into employment and the difficulty of them finding jobs. If there are skill gaps in our economy, why don't we say, if you're an engineer, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, no fees. We can train the right people. There's all sorts of ways we can make the system better.
OK. Munira. Obviously, this was something, I mean, I think loads of us here, if we're old enough, remember Nick Clegg apologising and the various memes that then came from that for going back on the Lib Dem pledge not to introduce tuition fees, and of course they did. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is possibly going to be one of the biggest mis-selling scandals? Or the next mis-selling scandal?
Well, I think the system, and as Oli has eloquently laid out, is broken because of the way that it has evolved since then. So, yes, there was our history in government for which, we paid a heavy political price for going back on a promise not to raise tuition fees. But actually, every day we were in government, we fought for maintenance loans for our poorest students so that they wouldn't end up borrowing more. As soon as the Tories were left on their own, they scrapped maintenance loans. So students from disadvantaged backgrounds are having to borrow even more. We fought to keep the threshold at which you start paying back at a higher level. Soon after we left government, the Tories cut that threshold, and now the Labour government is going to freeze that threshold for 4 years. This is yet another stealth tax on top of the stealth tax we've got in terms of income tax, which graduates and all of us are having to pay. Do you know by 2031, somebody on national minimum wage will have to start paying back their student loan?
So what do you think should happen, Munira?
So I think we need to raise the thresholds, and I think they need to keep rising in line with inflation. As Oli has said, I think we do need to look at the interest rates. And I think you raised an interesting point about public sector workers. I was contacted this week by a couple in my constituency, both from working class backgrounds, worked really hard to get to university and are now teachers. We desperately need teachers. We've got serious teacher shortage. And they said to me, we're each paying 250 quid a month, and our debt is growing. So I think we should be seriously looking at whether we can put measures in place for certain parts of the public sector, particularly where we've got shortages, whether that's doctors, nurses or teachers. So there's a whole package of things that I think need to be looked at. But I think it's outrageous. And this stealth tax, this freeze, is going to mean your average graduate pays £7,700 more back under Labour's freezing of the thresholds.
All right, lots of hands up. Some of them, I suspect, are going to be paying these loans. But let's kick off with you, Sarah, and then Blue Sweater.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering if the panel think this is another example of the broken social contract for under-30s, whether that is climate crisis, cost of living, the housing crisis, all of these issues are not being pointed, they're not supporting people our age in my demographic. I'm under 30, was planned to as well. And I just think, this is another example of the middle age ultimately prioritising themselves within politics, and it's actually the younger generations that are suffering.
Younger people being let down?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Yes, in the middle there, yes. Yes, you.
So I'm 18, I'm starting uni in September, and it's already looking before interest that I'm going to be paying about £60,000 worth back to the loans. And at the current rate of the job market, it's already going to be a challenge for me to get a job. Is it worth paying that amount of money to get a degree, and what can the government do to support me after I finish my degree and getting a job?
So has it made you have second thoughts? It sounds like you're going to go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it, but I have looked into apprenticeships, and I know a lot of my friends are looking into apprenticeships instead of the traditional path.
Right, OK. There's a man right in the very far corner over there. Yes.
Hi there. So I graduated last year, and I've got friends who have actually, one of my friends, Rory, has already started paying off his student loan because he knows if he leaves it, it's just going to get more and more, and he's going to end up paying a lot more than he borrowed in the first place.
Right. Well, lucky if he can do it, I guess. Not everyone's in that situation. Yes, there's a man here in the front in a white shirt and dark blue suit. Yes.
The interest rate seems to be completely abnormal. It seems to be much more expensive than taking out a mortgage. So if it's fair that students do pay back, why not set the interest rate at 0? So they just pay back what they've borrowed, and that's it. Simple.
Emma.
So we did inherit this system, and it was introduced by the Tories and Liberal Democrats. I think that's worth saying. And the Plan 2 that you're experiencing was introduced by those parties.
Labour introduced tuition fees under the Blair government.
Yeah, you trebled them, despite the
Yes,
fact
in
that you
fact,
were against
that was
them
what
at one
Nicola was
stage.
talking about, not raising
Yes,
and not introducing.
It was actually, you were going to scrap them if you remember it in 2010, and then you trebled them. But anyway, and I voted against that at the time, if you want to settle the scores. But there we go. But as a government, we've got to try and balance here the fairness of the student loan system and also fairness for taxpayers more generally. So, you know, I understand the point that you were making here about your generation and how tough it is for your generation, house prices being a much bigger ratio against your salary coming in. That's why we are trying to do other things for your generation. For example, building the 1.5 million homes so that house prices aren't unaffordable for you, introducing renters' rights so that you have a better deal when it comes to renting from landlords.
But talking about the graduate loans, I mean, you've got Martin Lewis, you know, who's a very well-respected specialist in kind of all affairs to do with money. It says freezing the salary threshold, which is what is going to happen from April.
From April. It is
freezing the salary
open,
threshold
yeah.
is a breach of contract, because that is not the basis on which people took out graduate loans. Now, do you think he's right, or do you think, sorry, we just got to find the money somewhere?
Well, we have to find the money somewhere. We've got a tough fiscal situation. Those who graduate do earn more over their lifetime than those who don't go to university. So, you know, as I said, we've got to balance the fairness of the student loan system with the fairness of the tax system as a whole, and we are in quite straitened fiscal circumstances.
Zia, will student loans be the next mis-selling scandal?
Yeah, that was the original question, and I think there's a really well-worded question. Mis-selling, meaning what was the promise made to people taking out those student loans and going to university versus what did they actually get? And it was Tony Blair who arbitrarily set the target of half the country going to university. At the time, it was only about 20-odd%. And now we looked at it. I speak to so many young people who I think would be better off not going to university and actually going and doing things like apprenticeships. We need a lot more manufacturing jobs in this country, for example. And look, one of the things I would also make the point about is that I totally understand and genuinely do sympathise. As someone who had a student loan myself and paid it off, albeit not, I was just before, you know, the rates that you had to pay. Look, who is going to have to pay for that? And it's invariably going to have to be people who wait on tables, people who work in care homes, people who work on construction sites, who didn't go to university, who are paying their taxes. And so one of the things, look, I'm head of policy at Reform, one of the things we are looking at is the fact that, look, our universities are an amazing asset for this country. 3 of the top 10 universities on this planet are on these little islands. We should be really, really proud of that. But we should also be really clear, there are underperforming universities in this country. There are universities that are frankly being propped up by public sector money. And I do think, going back to the original question, are mis-selling their degrees to young people. And we have to look at that and have an honest conversation about it.
Julia.
Yeah, I think it's not wrong in principle to pay for an aspect of your education, but when I went, it was £10,000 that I paid in my loan, and what's going on at the moment is extremely worrying for people, particularly with the new changes that have been made at the budget. I think Zia's right that you know, we were the generation where Tony Blair suggested that half of everybody should go to, 50% of the population should go, of young people should go to university, and that has unfortunately led to the creation of a large number of low-value degrees. And the real tragedy is that some people are not going to be ever earning enough to be able to repay those loans because they haven't got the better jobs for those university degrees. And that's actually going to be bad for the taxpayer as well, because the taxpayer will probably end up paying a large chunk of of those loans. So the system's not really working for anybody. And I think we have to find a way to shut down some of the low-value degrees, move some of the funding into apprenticeships, and find a better way for some of those people that are in very tricky situations with the loan repayments, because it's not, there's so many aspects in which it's not good for having that level of debt for younger people, particularly a demographic aspect. We need people to be having children, we need them to be getting onto the housing ladder and building the next generation. At the moment, there is a debt trap there.
So would the Conservatives, I don't know, change the amount of interest being paid, change the time period over which it gets paid? What would you do?
Well, we certainly wouldn't have made the changes that Rachel Reeves has made at the budget.
What do you mean, freezing the tax threshold?
Yeah.
I mean, the Tories also froze the tax threshold.
Well, they cut the threshold.
But between repayment thresholds were frozen between 2021 and 2025.
We made some changes on the loan repayment in 2022. And what we would do is to move some of the money away from the university sector into apprenticeships and try and rejig the system that way. I'm not going to
rather than change the amount the students have.
Well, I'm not going to make up policy on the spot in terms of how we would deal with the loan book, but I think we have to look very carefully at the loan book and what it's doing to younger generations.
Okay. I'm going to try and fit in one more question, if I may, from Judith Coelho. I hope I pronounced your name properly.
Thank you, yes. Does the panel agree that the British people have lost pride in their nation and national identity?
Now, Judith, can I ask you what prompted you to ask that question?
What prompted me to ask the question was because I'm extremely proud to be a British citizen living in this country, extremely proud of its values, of its institutions, of its democracy, and, as I say, the way it conducts itself both domestically and internationally. And in my judgment, politicians need to start to bolster that basis on which we all live in this country. And I, for one, am very glad that I wasn't born in America or in China or in Russia.
Okay. Zia. Does the panel agree that British people have lost pride in their nation and national identity?
I don't think British people have, writ large. I don't believe that. But I do think we've had a succession of governments that I'm afraid have not been willing to stand up for the national interest. And you can look at the polling. You know, a plurality now of Gen Zers say that they would question whether they would fight for this country. You look at the relentless attacks on the legacy of Sir Winston Churchill, I think the greatest Briton ever to have lived. We're seeing this time and time again. You look at what is being taught to our children in schools. You look at even the Church of England talking about paying reparations when it was the West Africa Squadron, it was the British West Africa Squadron. It was Britain that abolished slavery. It was the first major power in the world to abolish slavery and then dispatched the West Africa Squadron. We are the mightiest navy in the world at that time to go and uphold and enforce that law and freed hundreds of thousands of slaves at enormous cost in terms of treasure and blood in terms of our navy. That's something we should be incredibly proud of as a country. How many of our children in schools as we speak are being taught about that? And yet all of the conversation invariably is about reparations, about how Britain should be ashamed of its history. Of course, Britain does not have a perfect history. No country does. But I would argue Britain has the richest history, a history that we should be incredibly proud of, and we're simply not seeing that delivered in the form of a national curriculum. That's something Reform is looking at to make sure that it is, and in the form of just how people are made to feel about this country. Let's take the last point I want to make on this is let's look at what's happened with the Chago silence. This relentless obsession from Keir Starmer, and by the way, it was the Tories who did 5 rounds of negotiations on this to begin with, to hand over, to cede sovereign territory in the form of the Chago silence and then spend billions of pounds of your money to then lease it back over the decades to come. Absolutely nothing about that that's remotely acceptable. We need a British government that will stand up for the British interests.
I don't know if you're aware, and I don't know if this changes your opinion, that Donald Trump has said this evening he thinks that was probably the best deal that Keir Starmer could get.
He did say that. I read the Truth Social post that President Trump posted. I disagree with the notion that he has, quote, endorsed the deal. But what I will say is, to the degree that he has done that, it has clearly come as a result of Keir Starmer expending enormous diplomatic capital in this country. For what? To gain sovereign territory? No, to cede sovereign territory and then lease it back at the cost of tens of billions of pounds over the coming decades.
Munira.
So thank you for the question, Judith. No, I don't think we as a British people have lost pride in our country. You talked about our institutions, our democracy, the rule of law. Whilst they have taken somewhat of a battering under successive governments, we do still have those. We still have freedom of speech in this country. And actually, for me, pride in Britain is something we see every day in our community, certainly in my constituency of Twickenham. I see every day people helping each other, whether that's in practical ways or in financial ways. And we saw that at its best really during COVID, when we saw people coming out in their droves, not just to support and champion our key workers in our health service and in other key worker professions, but also to help others who are vulnerable. That, to me, is what the British spirit is about. We celebrate our diversity. We don't make it a subject of division, like some politicians on this panel would like to do. We celebrate our diversity, we celebrate our multiculturalism, and we celebrate our sport. Even when we're doing really badly, whether it's in the cricket or the football, we're all out there with our flags, cheering on England and Team GB. So I think we're proud to be British. We've been through a really difficult time as a country, economically, and with our public services so strained. And I think we do feel quite down about that at times. But ultimately, we are proud to be British, and we should celebrate that. And we see that every day in communities up and down the country.
Sorry, Munira, to keep cutting it, because we've got about 8 minutes left, and I want to bring you all, but I really want to bring the audience. So I'll ask to be reasonably brief, but let me get some audience in. Yes, the woman with the glasses, and the blonde hair.
Hi there. I'm really proud to be British, and there are some amazing business owners in Britain that are doing inspiring work. But the tax burden on those businesses are sending them globally rather than actually flourishing in Britain itself.
Okay. Well, yes, person there in the white top, yes, and the glasses, yeah.
I think this whole idea of being proud to be British, I think in essence we are. However, I think there has definitely been an erosion, and there have been moments where I feel embarrassed to be British. And I think that really stems from...
Like when?
I think this whole idea of, I live in an area where we have received some asylum seekers, and the use of the British, or the English flag, in fact, it's not even the British most of the time, it's the English flag, is becoming now, is being weaponised and politicised, and it's becoming something that is, or something of unity, that's now actually to promote divisive policies. And one of the things I'm actually a school teacher, one of the things that we have to teach are British values. One of the British values we have to promote is tolerance. I do not see tolerance anymore in politics. So I think if we're going to talk about how the impact on national identity, that comes from leaders, and that also comes from political leaders who talk poorly of our own country.
Okay. Well, here in the front, in the red cardie, yes.
I'd like to say that also, following on from the British values, we were taught them from primary school and it was instilled in us. And I am proud to be British, but I don't appreciate, Zia, you mentioning Gen Z. I'm assuming, calling out that you don't think Gen Z have pride in Britain, and I really think they do. I mean, I think we all do, but I think your party especially isn't giving me much to be proud of with the way that your party discriminates or attempts to discriminate against people. I was reading your policy just before we came in, and the first 4 listed are all about immigration, all about trying to change diversity, which is what makes Britain great.
Okay. If I get a chance here, I'll come back to you. I just need to get the camera. Oli.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry, you have to be reasonably brief.
OK, sure. I was surprised when I walked down a high street and I saw a load of England flags. I thought we were all really excited about the women winning the Rugby World Cup, and I was quickly sort of proven wrong on that point. Look, the flag is a symbol for many things, and there's a part of the problem with the left is that they sort of abandoned that territory and allowed people to reclaim it. I'll quote an Irishman, sort of slightly peculiarly in this sense, John Hume: "You can't eat a flag." Try wrap yourself up in a flag when you can't heat your home. Will it keep you warm? It won't. Patriotism isn't a blind adoration of Britain. It's wanting your country to be better, and it's certainly not complaining about children being taught its history.
Julia.
So the question was, have we lost pride in our country? And I find that quite a sorrowful question. I think I grew up in a generation where we thought history was over, where we didn't have to tend to our democratic institutions, the things that made our country great, the values of equality before the law, and we've seen a steady erosion of those things and a sort of pushing forward of identity politics that I think has ultimately been very divisive. I don't think we've done a good enough job of tending to the institutions which make sure that we all feel confident, that we are all treated equally, that we all can build cohesive societies. And I think the result is that we are less trusting of one another. And I think that's very sad, because actually there's so many good things about this country. There's a lot of love that we have and pride in what we are as a country. And I think that we haven't been careful enough at tending to our institutions and also our obligations to one another.
Woman here in the front in the glasses.
I'm absolutely proud to be British, but I'm also proud to be an Anglican and to recognise when it's right to say we were wrong and when it's right to put things right. You mischaracterise reparations. This is about us as a nation having values, having compassion, and thinking about a future that involves us all.
Emma.
Well, thank you for the question. I am proud to be British, and it's great to hear that you are too. We have some great institutions that are the envy of the world. The NHS is a great institution. We're making some great progress, bringing down waiting times. I don't want to make this a party political broadcast, but I think the NHS is something that the British public are proud of. I think that our values, and you talked really movingly about what you were taught at school, of tolerance, of diversity, of fairness, of our democracy. And, you know, people come to the UK to visit our great country. We have world-leading universities. We have world-leading football teams. As a young girl, I was never allowed to play football at school. I was so pleased to see that it was the women that brought football home to England. So I think we have a lot to be proud of. Of course, we've got problems that we need to solve and tackle head on. And this week, what we wanted to be talking about is this £20 million Pride in Place funding that we're putting in place.
No one's been paying any attention, have they, really?
But it is important, because there have been some really deprived communities who need that investment, and we are giving them that money, and that we're empowering local people to make decisions about what to do with that money too.
I'm sure they'll be very happy with you, number 10, that you managed to get that in, even though I'm not entirely sure it was relevant to the question.
Zia,
do I want to...
the high street.
Do you want to respond? The woman here in red was talking about the first 4 points on your manifesto, I think you were saying.
Yeah.
About divisiveness generally.
The first 4 points in our manifesto are indeed, or on our policy website at the moment, are indeed about immigration. Immigration is the #1 salience issue for the British public as we speak, according to the latest YouGov polling. The British public voted for less immigration in 4 consecutive general elections, and clearly the Brexit referendum result was in no small part because they wanted less immigration. And what did the British people get instead? They got 12 million people gross who were shipped into the country under the Tory government, 6.5 million people net. They got 400 net new prison places at the end of that period and fewer hospital beds. That is why we have a country where our public services are on the brink of collapse, why people feel that our culture is being eroded. So I totally respect why you might feel concerned about those things, but that is precisely why Reform is leading by 10 points in the average of the polls right now. We make no apology for saying we need secure borders, #1. We need to stop the boats from coming, the real-time invasion of this country. We must also deport illegal migrants who are in this country already, and we need law and order. That is the case we're making to the British people, and we'll see what happens in the general election.
I think we have to be truthful about the challenge that immigration has presented, particularly the speed at which it has changed the country and the challenges that presents to communities. But a lady in the audience also talked about the challenges that businesses are under. I think there's also an issue in this country about the fact that the incentive structure is all wrong. So people who are working incredibly hard feel like they're busting a gut and the government is taking from them, while other people who are not putting in the effort are being rewarded. And I think that's really starting to fray the ties that should be bonding us together as communities.
All right. I am afraid we have run out of time. There's lots of you. I know you were desperate to say. Can you say something in 10 seconds, do you think? Hang on, let's get a microphone to you very quickly. Off you go.
I'm an American.
Oh, OK.
I'm British. I'm an American, I'm British, I live in Dorking, and I'm very proud to be all of those things. I have had such an amazing experience living here, and I'm so proud to be from Dorking, and it's all about community. It's about working together as a community. I'm also a business owner, and it's been an amazing experience living here, and it is about community and working together And I'm very proud to be all of those things, so thank you.
Well, a lovely optimistic note to end on. Thank you. OK, our time is up. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much to the audience here for putting all your points. Apologies to those of you who had your hands up, and there were lots of you that I could not get round. Thank you. And thank you at home, of course, for watching from Question Time in Dorking for this week. Bye-bye.